Bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs.
Bows and TKOs. We are live, episode 64, coming at you on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon after the Labor Day holiday. I'm your host, Shane Gillette. For this episode 64, a little bit of a shorter episode because we only are previewing this weekend's card after no UFC action last weekend. We have fights that have been announced, previewing the Bellator Championship Series this weekend, as well as UFC Fight Night Vegas 97. Before we jump into the MMA show, rocking my Grizz gear, college alumni. I'm a University of Montana graduated in a broadcast journalism degree. They got their first win at home, a little dicey, but got the win in prime time. My other team, the University of Wyoming Cowboys, didn't have as much luck. They played here in Tempe. I went with my girlfriend and watched them get absolutely obliterated. I think it was 48-7 final score. I left probably 5 minutes left in the third quarter. It was already 30-something to 0. Wyoming scored at the very end of the game. Wyoming winning a bowl game last year, the Arizona Bowl in Tucson. I got to go to that as well. Having a pretty good year. We're all excited about this young quarterback who's actually from Mesa, Arizona, in his hometown state. And first play, pick 6. I think the next series interception, it was just a train wreck. A reason that Wyoming was playing here in the first place is Arizona State's using that as kind of a warm-up game. But I didn't expect Arizona State to outclass them that bad. The spread was only 7 points, and it was a lot worse than that. This weekend, also got to see the Dodgers and Diamondbacks in the division rival game. The Diamondbacks swept them in the playoffs last year, so that was a ton of fun. A lot of Doyer fans. Got to see Shohei Ohtani, the first player in MLB history. 43 steals, 43 home runs in a season. The night I went, he broke it with his a steal and a home run in the same game. So got to see my ex-Angel bring in some more history. Had a solid Labor Day weekend, did some fantasy drafts. The league I am commissioning, I'm drafting tonight. We got a Dana White Contender Series tonight, so we won't recap that until next week. For those of you that like Hard Knocks as well. But let's jump into the MMA action. We have Roosevelt Roberts in, Nicholas Mota out, taking on Ludovic Klein September 28th. So Klein getting a short notice opponent that has a couple of weeks of notice. And then on even shorter notice, we have Joshua Van stepping in against Kevin Borjas against Edgar Chairez at UFC 306. UFC El Noche happening at the Sphere. I'll be there, still super excited, and we'll be all sorts of hyped up for that in the Sugar Show next week on episode 65. We have a bantamweight showdown. Brady Heiston and Jake Hadley going at it October 19th, as well as Darren Elkins and Daniel Pineda on that October 19th card. And then just announced before I came on, in the flyweight division, we have the return of Brandon Moreno. He'll be taking on Amir Albazi November 2nd on that Canada card. So Canada getting a pretty solid card, especially with that addition. Then we have UFC 308, Shara Magomedov taking on Armen Petrosian. That should be a fun kickboxing showdown. We have Jonathan Martinez and the MMA Labs, Marcus McGee at UFC 309. That should be one hell of a bantamweight scrap as well. And then also on 308, I skipped over it on accident. We have Farid Basharat taking on Victor Hugo. So some good matches coming up. This weekend, we also have the Bellator Championship Series. Why they're doing it like this under the PFL brand, I'm not too sure. But we have the main card starting in San Diego at 5 p.m. Pacific. This will be on Max on Saturday, head-to-head with the Apex event. We have Usman Nurmagomedov taking on Alexander Shabli. This should be a solid bout. I expect Usman to make slight work here. We have Lorenz Larkin taking on Levan Chokeli. I love me some Lorenz Larkin. We have the return after a little more than a year off of Douglas Lima taking on Aaron Jeffrey. Excited to see how Lima looks. We have former UFC fighter Yancy Medeiros taking on Jora Avazian. And then University of Wyoming collegiate stud. Watch out for him. Bryce Meredith taking on John McAloley. So really excited to see Bryce Meredith back there. See him get another win in, that close to moving up the ladder board and having some real opportunities, whether that's PFL, UFC, whatever it is. And then let's just do a quick lay of the land. What do we got coming up to close the year on these events? We just talked about the Bellator event. I think the Bellator event is lacking, personally. I've kind of talked shit on the PFL and their product, and I keep trying to give it a chance, and it just never quite delivers. But they are trying their best. They have a massive PFL Super Fight pay-per-view card October 19th. Going head-to-head with the UFC. It is not fully announced. All we know is that Francis Ngannou will be taking on Renan Fajeda, and then Chris Cyborg and Larissa Pacheco. So 2 solid bouts. Excited to see that card get fully developed, see what they could bring to the fight fans. Then we will have the PFL Championship. I believe it'll probably be in November in Madison Square Garden, but we don't have that scheduled yet. For their Bellator side of the things, we have this card this Saturday on September 14th. We have the Championship Series in London. Leah McCourt's fighting. Tim Wilde's taking on Mark DeCasey, the new signing from the UFC. Archie Colgan, another University of Wyoming stud, undefeated, fighting. So pretty lackluster card there. The main event is Leah McCourt and Sarah Collins. Going into October 12th, they go to Chicago. There's no card announced yet. And then they have one scheduled November 16th in Paris, headlined by Patchy Mix and Leandro Higo. I don't even know who Leandro Higo is. Why is Patchy Mix fighting him? I have no idea. So when it comes to Bellator and PFL, there's not much to be excited about besides maybe that October 19th card. We will see how good Renan Ferreira really is. Obviously, next week we get what Dana White is owning as the best live sporting event of all time. UFC 306, Riyadh Season Noche. 2 titles on the bout. The Trilogy, Alexa Grasso, Valentina Shevchenko. The Sugar Show and Merab Dvalishvili. Really excited for that Ortega-Lopez fight. There will be a fun stylistic of Daniel Zellhuber, Esteban Robovics. Irene Aldana, Norma Dumont. I mean, there's really not a bad fight on this card. It's not as stacked as some of the better cards we've seen earlier in this year, but it's going to be hard to compete with that. Then we have the fight night in Paris, Moicano and BSD. Looking at this, some quality fights, but nothing that really jumps off the page outside the headliner, to be honest with you. Nasruddin Imavov and Brendan Allen should be good. I'm excited to see Morgan Scherer back in the octagon. Fares Ziam and Matt Frivola should be solid. So just a classic fight night, worth watching, fun stuff, but nothing too intriguing. Then the UFC heads to Salt Lake City for UFC 307. Alex Pereira, Khalil Roundtree Jr. You want to talk about a collision course ready to happen? That's it. Raquel Pennington finally defending her title against Juliana Pena. Jose Aldo, Mario Bautista should be fun. Roman Dolidze, Kevin Holland. Mozfar Vloev, Aljamain Sterling will be good. Stephen Thompson, Joaquin Buckley. Ketlin Vieira, Kayla Harrison. Marina Rodriguez, Yasmin Lucindo. I would probably actually put this just as good as UFC 306. Maybe UFC 306 gets the advantage because of the venue. Then we go to a fight night back to the Apex. The headliner, Brandon Royval and Tatsuro Taira. Let's see if Tatsuro Taira is ready for the deep end and to be a contender, although he's still so young. The rest of this card is probably not finalized, but not very deep, classic fight night. Then we go back to the Apex again the next weekend, headlined by Michelle Pereira and Anthony Hernandez. Only 3 fights on this card so far. They're solid, but that will be built out more. Then we have UFC 308 in Abu Dhabi. Ilya Topuria, Max Holloway. That is the creme de la creme matchup if you ask me. And even the co-main Robert Whittaker, Khamzat Chimaev is fantastic. Cyril Gane, Alexander Volkov, Magomed Ankalaev, Alexander Rakic, Lerone Murphy, baby, and Dan Ige. Jeff Neal, RDA, Shara Arman just got added. Yeah, this card is the creme de la creme so far. I think it's way better than 7 and 6. If you want to go, you just got to go all the way to Abu Dhabi. Then we're in Canada for a fight night card that is solid. Aaron Blanchfield, Rose Namajunas, Derek Lewis, Janata Denise, although that's some weird matchmaking if you ask me. Ayman Zahabi, Pedro Munoz, Alexander Romanov, Rodrigo Nascimento. Yeah, there's some solid fights there for a fight night. It's about as good as it gets. Regional location, that's great. Then we have another Apex bout that is to be determined. There's 1 fight on it. Then we go to MSG for UFC 309. That should be announced soon. I'm assuming they might announce that at the Sphere press conference week. Then they go to China before Thanksgiving. We don't have announcements there. Then we're back to T-Mobile for UFC 310, a fight night in Tampa Bay. So I would say the highlight right now, 306 and 307 are pretty damn solid for a fight night card in Edmonton. That's going to be good. But UFC 308 stealing the show. But let's talk about this weekend. We got UFC Fight Night Vegas 97. Prelims at 1 p.m. Pacific. Main card 4 p.m. Pacific. Both on ESPN+. Can't compete with your college football. If I were to preview this card for you, I would say there are some interesting matchups. We have a lot of new UFC faces on this card that are trying to find their ways with the promotion, but not much for very high-level fighters that are future contenders that have championship skills and abilities besides the main event. The main card matchup should bring a ton of violence. The prelims have a lot more to be desired. I'm more excited about the Ultimate Fighter fight that got moved from the last Apex card than the others on the prelims, but I will preview this a 4 out of 10. That's my typical fight night preview, but sometimes it over-delivers like last week. It did. So a lot of fights we will not break down, but are worth watching and tuning into. We have Jacqueline Amarim taking on Vanessa Demopoulos. We have Road to the UFC winner Yi Zha taking on LFA alum Gabriel Santos. We have Contender Series alum Andre Lima taking on LFA alum Felipe Dos Santos. We have PFL alum Yanal Ashmuz taking on Contender Series alum Trevor Peak. And then we have that Ultimate Fighter fight that has been rebooked. Neither guy were champions. Ramaska had to pull out due to injury. But we have Zigamontis Ramaska taking on Nathan Fletcher. And I would assume this is like, hey, winner gets a UFC actual contract. But I have no idea what their contracts are right now. And then we have Andre Petrosky taking on Contender Series alum Dylan Budka. And then sadly today, or I guess it's not sad, but we have announced that Alessandro Costa, I think it was yesterday evening, is out of his fight against Matt Schnell. There is rumors that Cody Durden will be stepping in, but I don't believe it until I have certain sources that clarify it. Let me see if that has been clarified. It has. So, Cody Durden is stepping in on literally, let's see, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 days notice to fight Matt Schnell with Costa out. Should be a fun matchup. We obviously aren't breaking it down because that just got affirmed. We'll put in here Cody Durden in. But that should be a solid scrap. Huge opportunity for Cody to get back on the right track. And Matt Schnell's in desperate need of a win. We're going to kick this off with one prelim fight. We have Ryan Superman Spann, 33 years old with a 21-10 record, taking on Ovince OSP St. Preux, 41 years old with a 27-17 record. Now, OSP has been around for a long time. He seemed to be trending in the right direction, but, getting close to the end of his days at 41. But in his last fight, he pulled off a solid, close, hard-fought victory against Kennedy and Shekwaku. That was in March. And now he is facing what I think is his toughest opponent since Jamal Hill, who he fought in 2020. Ryan, has struggled against the top of the division in the past, but he is looking to rebound in the middle of his prime. Breaking this down, Ryan trains out of Fortis MMA. He is a blue belt in BJJ. He's a Legacy FC alum, Contender Series alum, an LFA alum. He was a former LFA champion. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. He hasn't won since November of 2022. 12 of his 21 wins are via submission. Not because he is a great submission expert, but he batters them, gets on them, and just submits them. 6 via knockout. So 18 of his 21 wins are via finish. And 4 of his 10 losses are via knockout. Now, OSP is a southpaw fighter. He has a brown belt in BJJ. He has the most Von Flue choke submissions in UFC history with 4 of them things. He has the most bouts in modern UFC light heavyweight division history with 25. And he is a Strikeforce alum. Now, OSP has definitely showed off some solid technical kickboxing. And he did it in his last fight against a very long and lengthy and Shekwaku. And he was able to keep a solid pace for 15 minutes, which that could be who's going to do better in the later rounds if this fight goes there. It could be the winner. Now, Ryan lost a war against the up-and-coming Bogdan Guskov, and in his rematch against Anthony Smith, he was a lot more competitive than the first time. I do think he's improving. He's just fought some tough fighters. This division is to knock out or be knocked out or finish to be finished. But I do think that Ryan is going to be too powerful for the older and smaller OSP. OSP has been finished in each of his last 3 losses. But I do think the longer that this fight goes on, it could swing into OSP's favor if he does some clinch work, dirty boxing, whatever he could do to wear out the younger span. But I'm trying I am picking and taking the younger, bigger fighter. I'm taking Superman Span. I'm putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. In the main card, we have Rong Zhu, 24 years old with a 24-5 record, taking on Chris Taco Padilla, 28 years old with a 14-6 record. Now, Rong Zhu is getting his second stint with the UFC. He's only 24 years old. 3.5 years ago is when he was in the UFC. And since his first stint, he has gone 4-0 outside the promotion. 3 of those have been in the road to the UFC to come back and earn a contract. And Chris hasn't had much success in some of the top of the division or feeder promotions, but has somehow found himself in the UFC and is coming off a victory against James Yontop via round 1 rear naked choke. Breaking this down, again, Rong Zhu is the road to UFC alum. This is his second UFC stint. He's on a 4-fight winning streak, and prior he was 1-2 in the UFC. 15 of his 21 wins are via knockout, 6 via submission. So 21 of his 25 wins are via finish, and 4 of his 5 losses are via submission. Now, Chris is an RFA, King of the Cage, Brave, and Bellator alum. He's on a 4-fight winning streak, 1-0 in the UFC. 7 of his 14 wins are via knockout, 5 via submission. So 12 of his 14 wins have come via finish. And he does have a 5-inch reach advantage. Now, Rong Zhu showcased some really impressive boxing, and I'm sure it has only gotten better, since he's left the UFC in focus because he's still such a young fighter. He's going to have to deal with the long, lengthy fighter here, but I think he will strike himself to victory as the more technical striker. For that reason, I'm taking Rong Zhu. We are putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down. And we getting that bread. Speaking of parlays, I put a lot of my future NFL parlays in, division winners, the exact Super Bowl matchup, a bunch of fun stuff. My exact Super Bowl matchup was Eagles over Chiefs, by the way. We'll see how that shakes out. They have a rematch. Maybe they get the best of them in this rematch. Regardless, I am pumped, if you couldn't tell, that the NFL is back. But let's jump in. We have 3 more fights on the main card because I had the Alessandro Costa, Matt Schnell fight prepped, but that fell apart this week. So we got Steve the Mean Machine Garcia, 32 years old with a 16-5 record, taking on Kyle the Monster Nelson, 33 years old with a 15-5-1 record. Now, this fight should be fun violence. Absolutely just balls to the wall. This should help the main card continue on its carnage path, especially, you got the short notice swap. Kyle Nelson was originally supposed to fight Calvin Kattar. There's a really short notice swap the fight before this. Sometimes that just your game plan goes out of the window. And Steve has been an absolute wrecking ball, coming forward, beating up his opponents. He's on a 6-fight finishing streak. And Kyle is really coming to his own. Now he's getting a taste of the deep end, although it's not as deep as the Calvin Kattar fight. But let's break it down. Now, Steve, he trains out of Jackson's MMA. He's a Bellator, LFA, and Contender Series alum. He's on a 4-fight winning streak. He's 4-1 since 2022. 13 of his 16 wins are via knockout, and he has a 4-inch reach advantage. Now, Kyle has a brown belt in BJJ. He's on a 3-fight winning streak and is 3-1-1. 6 of his 16 wins are via knockout. Now, Kyle has been defensively sound. He's good with his counter shots, and that was on display as he caught Bill Algeo for a finish. But Steve, he's a different animal. When he comes forward, he comes forward. Now, both men are in their primes. We got Steve at 32, Kyle at 33. But I just feel like Steve is willing to always kill or be killed. He's going to look for a finish, especially on short notice. I don't think Kyle is going to be able to last through his onslaught. But if Kyle can get deep in the fight, get deep into the second round, move it into a third round, things could get really interesting. As Steve hasn't seen a third round since 2020, and he lost that decision to Luis Pena. What a throwback name, Luis Pena, Ultimate Fighter. Shout out there. But for that reason, I'm taking the Mean Machine. I'm taking Steve Garcia. We are adding him to that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. We have Natalia Silva, 27 years old with a 17-5-1 record, taking on Jessica Bate Estaca Andrade, 32 years old with a 26-12 record. Now, this is a tough scrap to pick. It's going to be an absolute fun showdown. Both women definitely have different styles of fighting. Natalia is just hitting her prime at 27. Again, I feel like the prime is 30 to 35. And for women, it's more probably 27 to 31. But, Natalia is now getting an opportunity to fight in the top of the division. She's now taking on a former champion. Jessica is still in her prime at 32 years old and fighting at a high level as well. The timing of this fight in Silva's career, I think, is the more intriguing part, as I think in 2 years, a couple more fights, couple more top-ranked opponents, she would have been a lot more ready for this matchup, and I think does beat Andrade. But I'm not sure if she's going to be able to handle the brute force and physicality that Jessica brings, because it's completely different than most women in the division, 99% of them. Now, she hasn't fought someone like that in the UFC yet either, so this is a huge measuring stick for Silva. Breaking it down, Natalia has a purple belt in BJJ. She's a Jungle Fight alum. She's on an 11-fight winning streak, 5-0 in the UFC. 7 of her 17 wins are via submission, 5 via knockout, so 12 of her 17 wins come via finish, and she is rocking a 3-inch reach advantage. Now, Jessica has a black belt in BJJ. She's the former strawweight champion. She has the most performance of the night bonuses in UFC women's history at 6, all of women's UFC. There's a long list of accolades she has because she's truly an OG. She's Tied with Angela Hill for most Fight of the Night bonuses in UFC women's history with 4. So out of her performance of the night, 4 of the 6 are a Fight of the Night. She has the most post-fight bonuses in UFC women's history at 10. Most post-fight bonuses in the strawweight division history with 9. Most wins in UFC women's history at 17. Most bouts in women's history at 27. Most finishes in the strawweight division at 6. Most knockouts in the women's strawweight division at 4. She has the most knockdowns landed in a women's strawweight division fight and in women's UFC history at 4. She's the only woman in UFC history to fight in 3 different weight classes. She has the most bouts by a woman in a calendar year in UFC history, which was 5, but also tied for most bouts in a calendar year in all men and women at 5. She had the most significant strikes landed in UFC women's flyweight bout. Against Lauren Murphy, she landed 231 significant strikes. She had the first standing arm triangle choke in UFC history, which won her the 2022 submission of the year. That was against Amanda Lemos. She's on a 2-fight winning streak. She's 4-3 since 2022. 10 of her 26 wins are via knockout, 8 via submission. So 18 of her 26 wins have come via finish, and 5 of her 12 losses are via knockout. To finish or be finished. Now, I do expect Jessica to be aggressive to start forward, come bring in those big loopy combos. She has those big wide hooks. She's not a straight striker at all. And I do think Natalya is just going to be moving a lot. She's going to be bouncing in and out, light on her feet, try to kind of attack and combos in and then get back out, because she's going to want to avoid the power of Andrade. You bounce in, you're in there too long, those hooks are going to connect. That's night out for any lady in the division. And I do expect Silva to be the faster and more technical striker, of course. I could see Jessica getting a first-round finish here. You know, maybe just get close in range, strike, grab her, grapple her a little bit. But I'm betting on Silva winning by decision. I think she will land more strikes round over round as the more precise striker. And as the fight wears on, Jessica will slow. I'm not sure if Natalya is going to want to grapple and bring that into play here, but Silva might even throw some attempts out there as well. This is a very close fight. I am taking Natalya Silva, but no parlays where possible. Then we have one hell of a main event on our hands. Sad that they're fighting in the Apex. We have Gilbert Durinho Burns, 38 years old with a 22-7 record and the number 6 next to his name, taking on Sean Brady, 31 years old with a 16-1 record and the number 8 next to his name. Now, this main event is awesome. It's a very tough fight to pick, and this is Sean's second attempt at top-level competition. He is now facing a man who is past his prime, but is still in a really high-level fighter and in a tough place because he's coming off 3 losses in a row. So there is going to be a little bit of maybe more aggressiveness and desperation to get a dub. Sean is in his prime. He looked top form in the Kevin Gastelum fight. He outboxed him. He outwrestled Kelvin. And that was really needed because he got dominated and completely outclassed against Bilal Muhammad in his first attempt against the top of the division. Breaking this down, Gilbert has a BJJ style. He has a 3rd-degree black belt in BJJ. He's an orthodox fighter. He trains out of Killcliff FC with a bunch of dogs. He won bronze in the 2015 ADCC Worlds, which is like creme de la creme. He won gold in the 11 Worlds and the 13 No-Gi Worlds as well. He had the 2022 Fight of the Year against Khamzat Chimaev, an absolute barn burner. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. He is 2-3 in the UFC since 2022. 9 of his 22 wins are via knockout, 6 via submission, so 15 of his 22 wins have come via finish, and 3 of his 7 losses are via knockout, to finish or be finished. Now, Sean is an orthodox fighter. He has a black belt in BJJ. He's a Cage Fury alum and former champion with 2 successful title defenses. He's also an LFA alum. He's on a 1-fight winning streak. He's 1-1 since 2022. And really, this is just another measuring stick. Natalia Silva's getting a measuring stick fight. Now we're getting another one for Sean, but I think he's ready for it this time. I'm expecting Sean to be able to out-wrestle grapple Gilbert. Maybe not jiu-jitsu and other things. There's so many parts of grappling in the UFC. But when it comes to wrestling, I think he'll be able to out-grapple Gilbert. And I think he's going to try to put a showcase on display. He's going to do what Caio Borralho recently did and just try to strike with Gilbert. Gilbert does have solid striking. He's a durable fighter, and he does have cardio for days even at his age. But he isn't the most technical striker. So it's really going to be interesting to see what Gilbert's game plan is. I do think Gilbert is confident he can outstrike Sean. I don't know if I really agree with that. It's going to be interesting. But I do think Gilbert wants to put Sean in deep waters and use his submission abilities if Sean does try to wrestle. This is as close as it gets. I am going to go for the younger fighter. I'm going to go with Sean Brady. I hate to do it. Gilbert's my guy, but I am not putting this on any parlays. I think Sean just outlasts him. He's younger, he's durable, and he's got a big chip on his shoulder. But that's it for the Apex event this weekend. We got Bellator Championship Series in San Diego as well. And then next weekend, the Sphere is here. We have UFC 306. Again, Dana White is calling it the best live sporting event of all time. I wanted to be there. Didn't think I was going to be there, but we're going there. And this one's headlined by Sean O'Malley, Merab Dvalishvili, again celebrating Mexican Independence Day. And it's going head-to-head with Canelo Alvarez at T-Mobile. And then there's a week off after that. And then we get 9 consecutive weeks of UFC action. I'm so excited. I can't wait to break down this weekend's card and preview UFC 306 next weekend with you guys. Again, this is episode 64. I'm your host, Shane Gillette. See you next week.